Hello and welcome back to The Neverspodcast, a podcast dedicated to the discussion and dissection of every episode of the upcoming HBO series, The Nevers. An original sci-fi drama epic from writer, producer, director Joss Whedon. If you'd like to follow us online, you can visit us at hbothenevers.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube, simply at HBO The Nevers. You can stream our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, and basically anywhere else you can stream podcasts, really. I'm your host, Taheg, and on today's show we'll be discussing the HBO aesthetic and how we think that will fit with the Nevers, the Buffy reboots, and finally, who we'd like to see write or direct episodes of Season 2. Then we'll be dipping into the mailbag to answer your letters. And as I list it now, it really is quite a lot, so we should probably get started. Joining me today, as ever, are Kelly and Gina. How are you today, ladies?
Hey.
Excellent, thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Sadly, as our regular listeners may have noticed, Dennis is not here. He was busy and couldn't be here today, but I'm sure he will be back with us next episode.
And we have definitely missed Kelly.
Very much so. Glad to have you back, Kelly.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm glad to be back.
First thing, a quick PSA. We are not in any way an official podcast. We've had a few people online referring to us as being the official podcast and our website being the official website. We just want to let everyone know we're not at all. There is nothing official about what we do. I'm sure HBO will eventually have an official social media presence and a website, and when that happens, I'm sure there will be much fanfare. But we are simply a group of very passionate fans who wanted to share our love and our website and our podcast with the world. So just putting that out there. Speaking of passionate, dedicated fans, the Nevers cast, our good friends, have got their podcast up and running. So from everyone here at the Nevers podcast, we'd like to say hello and welcome to the world to them. Great to have another podcast out there all about the Nevers, and this is in no way a competition. Yes, everyone enjoy all the podcasts. Finally, I want to say a quick shout out to everyone over at the FOMO show, which I really, really love saying. They gave us a shout out in their episode about the Nevers podcast. We just thought we'd say hey back. And if anyone's finding us this week because of that, hello and welcome. So what's everyone up to since the last time we recorded, which seems like months ago?
Right? I'm even trying to remember what happened yesterday, so.
Tell me about it. Well, it's been a bigger break for me, and you're right, I feel like so much time has gone past, but I will say I have another podcast, which I will talk about later. Just celebrated our 1-year anniversary,
Wow.
which was pretty fantastic. It's been one hell of a ride. So that was the month of July. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been back here. Yeah, so that was the month of July, and we kind of just took the time off and relaxed, and our 1-year anniversary episode of the podcast is up on all podcasting apps. It's called I Spit on Your Podcast.
I said it before and I'll say it again.
Nice.
Awesome title.
How about you, Gina? What have you been up to? You're a busy lady.
So, LA always feels like San Diego Comic-Con almost every week. So, I've been lucky enough to... I've seen it Chapter 2 3 times already, and it comes out in a few days. Because I've got to advanced screenings from the studio. I obviously won't spoil a thing, so please, maybe, if you listeners want to, go see it Chapter 2. I can't recommend it enough. That's all I'm going to say.
Excellent. I love hearing that. I really enjoyed Chapter 1, so I'm super pumped. I guess I should probably go on Friday. Thanks for the reminder.
Oh my god, please. And then, if you haven't, please try to rewatch Chapter 1. Yeah, just because there's a little hints here and there of things that might happen in the sequel, and it's way better if you have a refresher.
Good to know. Thank you very much. I think it's now on Netflix, so pretty much, most people can watch Chapter 1.
Nice.
Well, we should probably dive into the news roundup. Rolly Earlham, stunt coordinator of Game of Thrones, has been hired as the stunt coordinator for the Nevers. That should be good. Rochelle Neal, aka Annie Carby, aka Bonfire, shared 2 clips of her practicing fire breathing, presumably in preparation for her role in the Nevers. Listeners can see those video clips by visiting the blog page on our site. According to cinematographer David Corley's website, he's working on the Nevers, filming behind-the-scenes footage for the series. What exactly this footage will be used for, we don't know. but it's safe to assume that at least some of it will be used for Blu-ray extras, online featurettes and general marketing hype. Planning application data reveals that the production company behind The Nevers has requested, and been granted, use of its filming studio for the next 5 years. The implication being they're planning for at least 3 seasons, 5 if they try and push out 1 a year. I don't know about you two, but that makes me very happy. The fact they're planning on not just this first season, but they're already booking the studio time to film at least 2 more seasons, makes me really feel like HBO are putting their weight behind this show. So, do you think that shows good things for the future?
Yeah, we always were all kind of hesitant. Like, we hoped there'd be a season 2, right? And obviously this isn't, like, official confirmation. However, it's beyond a good sign. Besides all the amazing crew that HBO has put together for this, now it's like, are you kidding? For 5 years? Like, oh, again, it seems like it's going to be more than just 2 seasons now if it's 5 years. Obviously, this takes a while to, like, write and produce and actually create, but I don't know. That's amazing. Like, it's me really hyped.
I think that's a good thing about Joss kind of outsourcing a lot of the writing to the amazing writer's room he's put together. It means he can be on set doing his usual Joss eye in the sky thing while the writers are all back in their little cave getting season 2 out of the way already. Like, they can already be getting season 2 set up while season 1 is still filming, now that they know they're guaranteed, but the sort of luck is on their side in setting up season 2 and possibly even 3, 4 and 5.
Yeah, exactly. And as we know, Joss Whedon, he writes his narratives and his story arcs, everything so well in advance, so he's already got this all figured out.
Definitely.
So I think that's great news. So far, there's only been, I think, fantastic news.
That's a really good point. There's nothing that is warning us about how much HBO has trust in this process. Like, if anything, it's all been amazing signs of how good the show's going to be.
They're really they're throwing their full weight behind it. And that shows not only that we'll hopefully get a product of the quality that we expect from HBO, but it shows they must have a certain amount of faith in Joss, in the script, and in the actors to know that this show is really going to connect with its audience.
Agreed.
And also, even besides the production company getting 5 more years, all the rest of the other news is really exciting. I really want to see Rochelle Neal, who's playing Bonfire. I really want to see her practicing fire breathing, because that's intense. Like,
it's so cool.
Instead of just having a stunt person or visual effects do that, she's like hardcore going there, and that's amazing.
True commitment
Indeed.
To character, for sure.
I'm also really hoping that the idea of not just having her sort of purse her lips and then CGIing in some flame will carry across to other aspects of the show as well. One of the things that I've really enjoyed about the past sort of 5 or so years, starting with things like Mad Max Fury Road and The Force Awakens, is the return of big Hollywood and, to a certain extent, TV practical effects.
Yes.
So I'm really hoping as much as can be done on set for the Nevers, I want them to do on set while making sure they don't set each other on fire, because that could cause a bit of a problem.
Yes, agreed. I'm all about as many practical effects as absolutely possible, because that's incredible. There's an incredible amount of work that goes into that. It looks better, so I would also love that.
Yeah, it never made sense to me why. I mean, obviously there's a logistical reason, but I also love practical effects more than visual effects. It just looks obviously more real. It helps the actors get into their performances better if they're not looking at just a green screen and they're actually interacting with something. So yeah, it's a good sign if an actress is literally fire breathing. Like,
I'm currently watching the new Netflix series of The Dark Crystal, Age of
awesome.
Resistance.
I really want to see that.
Loving that so far.
Yeah, so just talking about, practical versus CGI so that's like vast majority of the show is like the original movie, of the sense of it's all real, it's all practical effects, it's all puppetry. It's incredible. It's very much upgraded from the movie I think came out in 1985. So it's just like so pristine and clear. However, so far what I have noticed is that the Skeksis have CGI tongues. And, I think I can forgive that, but you can really tell that they are CGI, but it makes more sense to have their tongues be able to have actual movement, whereas I think previously they weren't able to have movement, or it just looks kind of cheesy, where if you want to update everything, you might need to have a CGI tongue, so...
That actually brings up a really good point. I feel like the only way visual effects, they should use that obviously more than practical, is if like they have no other choice, or if it's for a story reason. And I feel like a lot of films and TV shows don't look at it like that. They're just like, oh, this is cheaper and faster, so let's just do visual effects. But now I'm really curious to watch that and see it.
A few episodes in, it is really, really, it's a great show, and it's very well done. I hadn't noticed the CGI tongues, but I'm now going to look for them next time I watch an episode.
Great. I've ruined it for you, I'm sorry. But I guess maybe it was just really obvious to me. I don't know.
I usually watch late at night, so I'm not at my sharpest while watching it.
Right, that's fair.
But I think that is really the best way to use VFX in these kind of shows. Not to create the effect, but just to enhance what's been done with practical effects. So, to bring this back loosely to the Nevers, have Rochelle do a bit of fire breathing, but keep her a good, foot or two away from anything flammable. Then use the CGI to enhance the flames, make it actually hit the target, and then they, explode or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And enhancing the effect, not creating it, is, I think, definitely the best way to go.
I love that.
So, on to our first topic. HBO, what can we tell from their past dramas? And how do we think that's going to affect the look of the Nevers? I think I've only really watched 3 big HBO dramas in my time. And that was The Sopranos, True Blood, and Game of Thrones. 2 things mainly come to mind that connect those 3 shows aesthetically and in their general setup. One, they've always been quite rich. There's not many kind of empty rooms. There's always a lot of kind of set design, a lot of styling. It's always very lavish, which is, I think, will be perfect for Victorian London. So I'm hoping they do bring that across. And the second thing, which I'm really, really hoping they bring across, all 3 of those shows had amazing theme tunes. So I'm really hoping the Nevers gets a cracking intro, because I do love a good intro.
Me too. I feel like that kind of just sets the stage, you know what I mean, for what you're going to watch if you have a really strong intro and
Interesting
song.
fact about the intro to True Blood. That was actually made by Alan Ball. They were like, all right, we need an intro, give us a rough outline of it. So he went away, he cut together some pictures, laid over a track he found on YouTube, took it, he's like, yeah, this is sort of what we want. And they watched it and they were like, nah, that's it. You hit it out of the park. Don't swing when you hit the ball. We're running with that. Like, they cleaned up a bit, obviously, but... Nice. I mean, anyone that's in the intro, it is one of the all-time greatest intro sequences of a TV show. So I'm hoping that we get something of that caliber for this.
Well, and especially, obviously, a show set in Victorian London. It could be so cool, visually and music-wise. So it'd be a shame if we didn't have an awesome theme song.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. For me, I haven't watched a lot of HBO shows. I actually went through the HBO list just to refresh my memory, and I've seen season 1 of True Detective, season 1 of True Blood, all of The Sopranos, all of Rome, and all of 6 Feet Under. And that's it. What I do, and a lot of those are the older shows, the older HBO shows, but definitely what I could tell from all of them, you're right, fantastic cinematography. Like, I know that HBO shows are top-notch television shows, top-notch entertainment. They just usually don't have subject matter that I'm super interested in. But, it's top-notch cinematography, the acting, you're right, the music. I was just thinking as you were talking about the shows that I have seen, but incredible usage of color in their shows. Like, cinematography, you have to put in a lot of time and effort and thought into your details that you're creating for the show, and the usage of color. Like The Sopranos, it was, when they were outside, everything was like really bright. When you're at that little shop that they have is really bright. And I felt like 6 Feet Under, a lot of the colors were very muted and everything was kind of just like pastel and a bit dark. That show is quite dark. And Rome was also very bright, just overall, and I just think that if they just keep going with the history of HBO that will have all of these wonderful things. And I think I'm just, again, I've said this before, but I'm pretty pumped for just the budget, the high caliber, and this is like the pretty much the perfect next step for Joss Whedon, I think.
It's funny, I hadn't noticed it until you brought it up, but actually thinking back on the shows I've seen, they are excellent when it comes to using colour palettes to kind of to set scenes before anyone has even spoken, before there's even people on screen. Right. Their use of the colour and the setting really does set the mood from the moment the camera starts rolling. So I'm really looking forward to what they can do to kind of show the difference between probably, and we've got kind of the medical era, the region, sort of the underground, sort of ne'er-do-wells, the upper class, the orphans. It's going to be quite interesting to see if they do stick with their pattern of having quite distinct colour palettes to set tone.
Definitely. Yeah. And I haven't seen any of Game of Thrones, but anything that I have seen, I also noticed that in it, there's a lot of blues. I find there was a lot of blues, and my partner is a cinematographer, so I've learned a bunch about color palettes and
awesome.
Like it really just sets a tone, sets the feeling, enhances feelings and emotions and tones of certain scenes and everything. So I think that's just going to be fantastic to see.
Oh, I love how you're talking about that, because that's something, sure, I maybe take into consideration, but I love how you're focusing on the color palette.
My partner would be proud.
It makes me think of it in like a different way. And again, definitely. It just, I'm so excited for more of the world to see Joss Whedon's work. And he deserves to be a part of a network that does have prestige, you know? It's about
definitely,
time.
Yeah.
So...
He's really he's earned his spot in the pantheon, and now it's time to not cancel him before he has a chance to tell the story he's written.
And I kind of noticed something. I just did a quick Google search for HBO, and on Wikipedia, I've noticed that out of all the shows and every single thing they've ever done, everything at least has 2 seasons.
Interesting.
At least. So that's a good sign.
It's good to know that it shows that they don't kind of option properties that they don't have faith in. You know, they don't like to take risks, which is good because it means that if they have given him probably at leleast 2 seasons, maybe even 3, you know, they're looking to set their next big sort of trophy piece, which is good to know that it's something that I'm this passionate about.
And I was just looking up, I couldn't remember off the top of my head the really wonderful website. It's studiobinder.com, and that talks all about the psychology of color in film, and it's oddly, incredibly fascinating. Maybe that's not odd, but it was pretty amazing. And, you know, if you have a lot of blues, it represents, you know, cold, isolation, cerebral, melancholy, passivity, and calm. Thinking about the dark crystal, purple, which is a lot of hues of purple in the dark crystal itself is purple. Fantasy, you know, mystical, ominous, ethereal, you know, I've just learned to really love the psychology, of color in film. So if folks are interested in that, we're all nerds. We like this stuff.
Oh, I love it.
I know what I'm doing after we finish recording.
Right.
So now I'm waiting for the first sort of trailers to see what kind of color palette they use, to see what I can try and guess from that as to the direction they're taking.
Now that just got me thinking, like, when we have a first official, like, poster or something, like, we're all going to be freaking out.
And got just the article on the casting, kind of a paragraph on each character, had us going on for about 2 hours. I think a poster might actually kill one of us.
Exactly.
Assuming it's good. If it's terrible, we'll be very upset. Moving on to topic 2. Inspired by a question that listener Ethan asked us a few weeks back, the Buffy reboot from Monica Owusu-Breen. What's going on with that? Do we even need a Buffy reboot? Will Joss be involved, helping the plot out, maybe even writing or directing an episode here or there? Will he be executive producer? Will it be name only? Personally, I would much rather see a different story about a different Slayer still within the Buffyverse, rather than just a straight-up reboot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's a 20-year-old show now, but it still holds up so well. I watched it a few months back. It's still amazing. It doesn't need a reboot. However, from that finale, they just kick the door, they blow the doors right off their hinges. They have opened that whole world up. So there are so many amazing stories you could tell there. I don't really see why they can't just make a new story in the same universe, and why they have to reboot and tell us the same story again, maybe with a few tweaks. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I completely agree. I'll never forget this. I was at San Diego Comic-Con when the news first broke out that there was going to be another Buffy reboot. And I was with my friend, Eve, who had never seen Buffy. So I was like yelling. I'm like, no. And she's like, what? I'm like, you don't understand. And now cut to how many years later, she's seen Buffy and now she's just as upset as I am.
Yeah.
And I just don't see someone else with the same premise creating as great of characters. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
For me, I agree with both of you for sure. Definitely with that the series finale, like you said, just kind of kicking that door off its hinges, being like, all right, we've got, it's a free-for-all now. And if you read into season 8 of the comics, what I think would be fascinating is because we know that there are different groups of Slayers all around the world, and now they're all interconnected through technology and everything. So why don't we just have this small band of Slayers and whatever they're doing in a different place in the world? Have it set in Canada, have it set in the Middle East, you know what I mean? Just have it set somewhere else, Australia. And we could have cameos because it's still within the same universe, but it's still, generally the same kind of story, like the plight of the Slayers and the monsters and all the crap that they have to go through in their lives in this new world with now having all of these Slayers. And one of the other comics that I love, it was Tales of the Slayers and Tales of the Vampires. I love both of those so much, but the Tales of the Slayers was fantastic because it kind of went through a variety of stories of the Slayers throughout history. Like the early ones, we have Frey, who wasn't in that comic, but she has her own. But, it's interesting to kind of see how times change for the Slayers and their methodology and the mythology and everything that changes for them. So that's what I would like to see. You're right. Does not need to be a remake or a reboot at all. But I think if they set it within the universe, because it's a huge universe, he creates huge worlds, right? That I would be all for it. And if you can get a writer that's going to be as great as Joss and his team was with creating the types of characters and having it's hard to you can't get back the charm of the 90s. So you'd have to, of course, update it, which I think would be challenging for us as Buffy lovers to watch, because there'd be so much technology and things like that. Like they didn't have cell phones. Do you know what I mean? I think it would be hard. But if they could have it as this witty and as charming and funny, but moving and action packed, I think it would be great. And then we would have a chance to have a bit more of, I think, diversity in our cast, which would be amazing. And the odd cameo. Yeah. The odd cameo, I think I think a lot of those actors would love to have a cameo in the show.
What I'd really love to see is almost a kind of sequel of sorts. Very similar character arc. Girl becomes Slayer, fights monsters, trials and tribulations along the way. But instead, whereas Buffy was very much about the hidden war going on beneath the world, she had to keep everything secret. A good probably 25 to 30% of the episodes revolved around her trying to hide the fact she was super powerful. However, due to the awakening of all the potentials in the end of Buffy, there's no way the world wouldn't know that Slayers exist at that point. I'd love to see a kind of a sequel, reboot, whatever you want to call it, set in a world where everyone knows the Slayers exist. And through Slayers, everyone knows about vampires, werewolves, and things that go bump in the night. To kind of almost flip the story around. What happens if you're the Slayer in a world where everyone knows who you are and what you're meant to do? So instead of being about trying to accomplish your task while staying hidden, it's trying to accomplish your task while the eyes of the world are laser focused on you.
Yeah, exactly. That's a whole new set of challenges for them.
Yeah, in this world, getting real for a second, in a world where we live on social media, where one tweet from 5 years ago completely destroys your life.
Yeah.
How would that be if the image from 5 years ago was you stabbing a monster and it bursting into dust, or you failing, you getting knocked out by a vampire and the vampire biting someone? How is that going to splash back on you on social media if your every mistake is for the world to see, but your mistake isn't just, making a crass joke, it's slipping up and someone dying.
Right. Oh, God.
Could be a really compelling story.
My heart is just breaking.
Again, Monica, if you're listening,
for them.
That one's free. Take it and run with it.
You know what's so sad? I love all of your guys' ideas, and I really don't think it's going to be a sequel. Like, like, I love everything you're saying, and it almost make it okay, but I feel like she's going to take it back to high school. It's going to be different characters just set in a world where there's a Slayer, and it's like, we definitely don't need that, because A, like Taheg said earlier, just rewatch Buffy,
Yes.
And B, like, yes, we definitely need a more diverse cast, 100,000%. But then write something new, create something new for a diverse cast. It's almost like, it's almost like giving a disservice.
If you're going to get a diverse cast, you might as well tell a diverse story.
Exactly. It's almost giving a disservice, like, well, we can't think of anything for a diverse cast, so let's just come up with an idea that's already happened, but make it diverse. It's like, you can do that, but I feel like it'd be better if it was just a new idea.
Agreed.
100%.
So I don't know, I feel like since Joss is so busy with the Nevers, I personally don't see him actually writing an episode. Yeah.
Unless they offset it so that Buffy is airing, so that they're airing in different, so he can kind of write the Nevers, get that done, let them film that, jump over to Buffy, do an episode maybe, jump back to the Nevers.
I just don't see him being interested at all. You know what I mean? He did that for a long period of time, and it's so wonderful and almost just perfect as it is. You also have to move on with your career, with your life. Like, you don't go backwards, you go forwards. And the Nevers is his forwards.
Sure.
That's going to be his new, I think in my mind, Buffy type thing. So, move on.
Okay, let me put it this way. If the exact same writer's room from Buffy were doing this, I still wouldn't be gung-ho about it, because again, just write something else. Like, you guys already made magic, like, leave it be. But it's not obviously the same writer's room, so it's just, like you said, Kelly, I don't think his heart would be in it, because A, he's written for the comics for years, and that's the canonical story. This probably isn't, so it's like, yeah, I don't see him interested in writing an alternate universe, Buffy, anything, you know?
So Ethan, I hope that answers your questions. And if you have more, feel free to write them in. Okay, topic 3 is one I actually suggested myself. So needless to say, I have some answers in store. Our wish list for guest writers and directors for Nevers Season 2. Ooh. Obviously, Nevers Season 1 is done. The script is finished. They're at the acting stage. That's a pass. However, as we've previously covered, it's looking like there's a very, very good chance we're going to get at least a Season 2, potentially a Season 3, and maybe even, if we're very lucky, Season 4 and 5. So the question then becomes, who would you like to see writing episodes for future episodes of The Nevers? Now, I have three names immediately came to mind when I thought of people I would love to see writing The Nevers. One, if you know me or have listened to the podcast, will be quite obvious. One is slightly cheating, but I think you'll agree it's a solid choice, so I'll allow it to pass. And one may come as a bit of a surprise. I'll get the obvious one out of the way first. I mention him any chance I get. I would absolutely kill to have Neil Gaiman write at least one episode of this show.
Yes, please.
He's just amazing. He's my favourite person in the world that isn't related to me. And he's so good at that kind of strange, slightly fantasy, slightly sci-fi, mythology-heavy, character-driven writing. I mean, it's what he does. So I think he would be an absolutely perfect fit for this show, and I can tell by the reaction that you all agree. So, like, do I have your support here?
Yeah,
Yes.
sure.
The only pushback I have is if it takes time away from him writing a potential season 2 of Good Omens, that might be the only reason I don't want him to. But
I'm pretty sure he's already said that's not happening.
well, no, he says it's not completely off the table, and Amazon agrees. So I see that happening maybe in 5 years. So if he could do both, I am good.
My second choice, I think, is slightly cheating, but I think you'll agree, is a solid pick. His longtime sort of working partner, and in fact, his sister-in-law, Marissa Tancheron.
Yes.
She's just come off being the producer, writer, showrunner, etc. of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh.
That's now gone the way of all other Whedon properties.
Right.
So she's free now. I would absolutely love to see her and Jed, of course, maybe take over and do like writing and directing one episode or more. We've seen they've got a real great grasp of kind of the Whedon style. Yeah, they're very, very skilled at writing and show running. I think she would be an amazing pick for an episode or two of The Nevers. Don't you think?
Yeah, that's such an obvious choice that I didn't even think about. So 100%. 100%.
Yeah, I haven't seen much of her work, but I mean, she's in the Whedon family. So, of course, Let's have her join.
Indeed. Tangentially Whedon.
And you had a third one? Right.
There is a third one. This one may come as a bit of a surprise because I think every time I've mentioned him so far on this podcast, it's been in a semi-derogatory fashion. But when it comes to writing amazing one-shot episodes, there are very few writers working today, especially on British television, that are better than Stephen Moffat. If you look at the all-time greatest, most loved episode of Doctor Who, it's Blink, one of his episodes. While I'm not a huge fan of him as a writer, I think where he fails is in writing season-long arcs and writing big, sweeping character arcs. He wouldn't need to do that here. He would leave that to people that are great at it, like Joss. What he's amazing at doing is fucking rolling onto set like some kind of crazy pen-slinging cowboy, writing one killer episode and then fucking off into the sunset. If he could do that for The Nevers, I think he could, like, with the characters he's got, I think he could produce something really, really excellent.
So I could probably talk an hour about this very thing, because if you know me, two of my favorite things of all time, and probably my two favorite things of all time, is Buffy and the BBC Sherlock. So I always had a fever dream that for some weird reason Joss Whedon would write an episode. I know that would never happen, but it was just a dream, because I always wanted to see how his humor would be with like Moriarty. Like, Joss loves villains that have fun, so I would like do anything to see that. So you saying Stephen Moffat would be in The Nevers is also a great fit, because I think Joss, and when Stephen Moffat does good work, they really do care about characters and character interaction. So in a weird way, they can be similar. So I would love if Stephen Moffat wrote an episode.
I don't know some of these folks, but I'm sure that they would be great. I don't really have a wish list, definitely, especially not for season 2. I kind of want to see what happens in season 1 with the writers that are currently on it, to kind of see what kind of job that they've done. Of course, Joss Whedon is fantastic. Any kind of Whedon alumni, because I'm familiar with their work, so I know that they will do a good job. Maybe one-shot episodes from the folks from American Horror Story. If there are going to be some monsters or something, if it's going to be a bit darker of an episode, that would be interesting, because I love that series. It is kind of bonkers and bananas at times, but dark and weird and really interesting. And then definitely Penny Dreadful. I'm sorry, I don't know any, like, besides Ryan Murphy, who created American Horror Story, I don't know any of the writers' names from Penny Dreadful, but that Victorian London era monsters, it's gothic horror. Because in my mind, The Nevers is going to be a quite serious show. Maybe it's not going to be, but in my mind, I'm imagining it as a more serious show, like Dollhouse, in the sense that there was like some comedic moments that, Topher was a bit of your comedic kind of character for comedic relief. So I'm sure we'll have some of that. Probably Nick Frost's character will be kind of funny. But overall, the general tone of the show is going to be serious. I loved Penny Dreadful so much that would be a great kind of pairing, I think.
I could definitely see that working. I mean, if they're set in Victorian London, if there isn't an episode from the Penny Dreadful writers where they'd had to take out like Jack the Ripper or someone, that's just an opportunity. That's an opportunity missed. I mean, it's a match made in
I know.
Probably hell, because not heaven. Jack the Ripper's definitely not in heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Kelly. Like, I would love Buffy-esque writers to come on board for season 2. I would also love for them to keep the same exact writer's room for the most part, have everyone either co-write or write episodes that did in season 1, because that's important to me. Like, I don't want anyone losing their job. But I would love Marty Noxon and Jana Spenson and, you know, the regular Whedon-y writers. But I have 2 other ones that I would like to add really quick. One of my favorite female writers, and this is definitely not going to happen, but one of my favorite female writers is Jane Goldman. She has written the screenplay for Stardust, Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class, The Woman in Black. She also wrote, I haven't seen this film, but she also wrote Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. The only reason she's definitely not going to do the Nevers is she is the showrunner for the new Game of Thrones prequel for HBO. So I'm sure she's incredibly busy, but I just think that kind of sensitivity of like weird, but again, very focused on character interactions is what I think the Nevers is going to be. So that's one. Definitely not going to happen, but my other one is Melissa Rosenberg. She was the showrunner for Jessica Jones. She's also written a lot of the Twilight films. We're not going to talk about that, but I love Jessica Jones, and I definitely think Jessica Jones reminds me of the main character for the Nevers. So I definitely think, and she's also written some episodes for Dexter. So she has this kind of like darker sensibility about her. And since Jessica Jones is more modern than Twilight, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. And then one director that I would love, actually 2, kind of cheating, is Paul McGuigan. He directed most of the BBC Sherlock episodes. And I just think camera-wise and how the actors portray their lines, I think he's a phenomenal director. And he's directed, I believe he did stuff for Luke Cage as well. And then my last one is Douglas McKinnon. He directed Good Omens, but he also directed the BBC Sherlock Sherlockian Victorian London episode. So he obviously knows about Victorian London and how it's supposed to look and feel.
That's a good list.
Yes.
I was very happy if any of those joined. Especially
right?
Jane Goldman. I completely hadn't thought of her, but she would be perfect. And I mean, if she's already working for HBO, it's they're going to be filming in similar areas, maybe.
Right?
Just hop to the next set across. It could happen. Yeah, a lot of good choices there. Again, if you're listening, Joss, any of these people, call them up. It'll be amazing. Next, we're moving on to the listener-submitted letters. Some really good ones this week. We're in for a lot of fun. Our first letter comes from long-term friend of the podcast, D-Man. Is at it again. Been loving your podcast so far, you guys. Thank you very much, D-Man. Here's a light-hearted question for you. I'd love to have actors like Amy Acker, Enver Gyokaj, or James Masters appearing on the show. But they're all American, and The Nevers takes place in Victorian London. Do you think that if they appear on the show, they should appear as American interlopers, or should they attempt to do a British accent?
Please have...
Very
I would
funny
say,
question.
Please, can we do James Marsters as an American? I would love that.
Or maybe have him appear as a young Spike.
Yes, please. There's technology now where they de-age people. They just did in It Chapter 2 with the kids cast. Okay, we could totally have a younger Spike, okay?
But I am very much up for anything that means more Amy Acker on screen.
Agreed.
And things we do have that, the little kind of intros that there are American characters already. There's the evil American surgeon. He could have an evil American wife or an evil American husband, or just a best friend, brother, sister. There's 100 options of ways we could draft them over. And we do know James Masters' accent is acceptable. So he can do a passable British accent.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. I would also love for Amy Acker to have a British accent. Illyria always felt British to me. I know she's not, but she felt very Shakespearean. So I would love to try to hear her do a British accent.
She did rather have that aura about her, didn't she?
Right?
Yes. Yeah. Never thought of it till now, so thank you, Gina.
No problem.
But yes, any Amy Acker is good for me. I don't care.
Yeah, and Enver is just incredible. I haven't finished Doll House again. I'll always say that. I'm so sorry. I will finish it one day.
Still?
I loved it. I know. I absolutely loved it from what I saw. But yeah, Enver's phenomenal.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
So the great thing with these three, they could do American or British, in my opinion. So
I've never seen him try, but I'm pretty sure Enver could pull off a decent British accent. I see him as kind of a vaguely aristocratic English dickhead.
Yeah,
you could do that in his sleep. Great work as always, D-Man. Please keep it up. Your questions are always spot on. Our second letter is from Thorias. Hi guys. Really enjoying the podcast. It's refreshing to hear a group of fans who are, God forbid, excited about a new Joss Whedon property rather than riding the very tiresome train of thought of he did a thing I disapprove of, or he wrote one thing I didn't like, therefore he is evil and I will hate him forever. Side note, if you're a Joss Whedon fan, stay clear of Tumblr. Anywho, the first reason I'm writing is because something about the new round of casting announcements stood out to me. I haven't seen anyone bring this up yet, but it's interesting to me that there are two characters who do not, or cannot, talk. In the character breakdowns, both Viola Pretichon and Desiree Blodgett's sons are described as people who never speak. This makes me wonder if the not speaking angle won't be just some character quirk, but a larger story part of some kind. Will this be a situation like The Gentleman from Buffy, where one of the Touched is traipsing around Victorian London, stealing people's voices? Or, since you've already theorised that the Mary Brighton character may have a power based around her voice, could that tie into it somehow? These dots seem to connect. That is a banging question for us.
Right.
I hadn't even thought of that, but then when he says it, it's like, there's a lot of mutes going around. And the idea of, like, it wouldn't be a siren, what would it be? Going around stealing people's voices. But it's like, the idea of one of the Touch going around just, like, draining out people's ability to speak. That is, that's a season arc right there.
Sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, or the ability, yes, to steal the voices and use them as their own. That would be helpful for, doing the work that maybe they need to do.
Yeah, I love that.
It'll be interesting to see what they do with that.
I also like the idea that, like, obviously in Hush, that's just an episode arc and it's brilliant. I wouldn't want it any other way, but it is cool to think about it instead of it being just an episode storyline, like a season storyline, or even longer. So that's a really good question.
The idea of kind of, when we start off, there's two people with no voice, and then maybe like halfway through the series we meet another one, and this goes on for like the first 2 or 3 seasons, and then right then you're like, Baha, I'm the voice stealing man. I've been collecting voices for like 5 years, and now I'm
right.
Now I'm unstoppable. That would be a lot of fun. Although you have to wonder how stealing people's voices would give him power, other than being able to talk in their voices, which would be fun, but not exactly.
Yeah. Or there's a way that, there was some kind of curse or something happened where in order to get powers, you had to have your voice taken away.
Kind of a devil's bargain.
Yes, yep.
Or maybe this is Victorian London. Maybe it's some kind of disease that strikes the vocal cords, some kind of ancient curse that strikes at vocal cords, and like a plague.
Yeah, exactly.
Love a good plague. Lots of good story to tell. There's a lot of good story to be told in a plague, all I'm saying.
Oh, for sure.
But yep, Thorias isn't done with us yet. He has another question. The Nevers will be the first Whedon series to air on HBO, and thus won't be encumbered by the restrictions of network television. That being the case, do you think we should expect the Nevers to be more risque than we're used to seeing from Joss's work? Since HBO are big fans of nudity and sex and things like that, what do you think an R-rated Whedon show could have in store for us? And might this be a potential turn-off for fans who loved Buffy and Angel and the teen-oriented WB network back in day, who then tune into the Nevers and find lots of HBO-style sex and horror? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Best wishes, Thorias. Another great question there.
It's a fantastic question.
I'm a little bit torn on this, to be honest, because again, as I said, I've recently rewatched them, and Joss didn't exactly pull his punches. It's not like there was no risque humour or kind of implied... there was no, like, bouncing genitals, but there was a lot of naughtiness.
Much to our dismay.
Yes, much to our dismay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even in, like, season 2 of Buffy, like, Buffy and Angel slept together, and that was in season 2.
Yeah, it's a whole story.
When kids are watching, and I know that sounds weird now, but back in the 90s, I'm sure, I don't know. Yeah, Joss never really kind of skirted around that. Something about True Blood that was on HBO that kind of got me to stop kind of watching was, in my opinion, it started becoming too much and just kind of unnecessary, and that's why I never really finished Game of Thrones after 2 seasons. Like, me personally, I kind of hate gratuitous, like, let's just have it for no reason, just to have it, because we're adults here, and I personally don't see Joss doing that. I think if it is more risque, I think if it does show more sex scenes, I think it would still be done in a very tasteful manner, and I personally don't think there'd be a lot of nudity. We would just see certain things.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Fun fact, actually, Game of Thrones and the showrunners invented a term which I hope can now be burnt from the collective consciousness. The term was sexposition.
Oh, boy.
Basically, when they needed to have a character do lots of exposition, lots of talking, and kind of fill in the blanks a bit with the lore, they would just have some people doing it in the foreground so as to keep the people, in air quotes, interested while the exposition was happening. It was one of the stupidest things that's ever happened. There's this one scene, anyone that's watched Game of Thrones will know it, where Littlefinger is explaining a fairly dry story while also showing a new whore how to please the clients. And the whole scene is just so epically cringeworthy that it completely takes you out of the show, and you just think there's no need for this. And the thing is, I would like to think that Joss is better than that. And while there are a number of sort of streetwalkers in the show, so I wouldn't be surprised if, when we were in brothels, we saw a bit of what went on in brothels, because, it happened. But I wouldn't be expecting kind of Game of Thrones true blood levels of kind of nudity. Gore, possibly, but not nudity. And to be fair, he's a much better writer, so he even if he did put, 10-minute long expositionary speeches, they would be interesting enough that you wouldn't need anything happening in the foreground. You would just need to see the actors and their faces and their reactions, and that would be enough.
Sorry, I was going to say, for me, I definitely agree with you folks. I personally would love a more sexy R-rated Joss Whedon project where there's going to be swearing, some nudity, some sex. But for me, when it comes to sexuality and nudity and, let's say, horror and gore and violence, I want things to be as authentic as possible. So, if you shoot someone, there's going to be blood. If you cut someone a certain way, there's going to be a certain amount of blood. So I want them to just have things as authentic as they would be. Just like you said, Taheg, about if there's going to be scenes with, sex workers at the time, if they're going to be in a brothel, anything, just show things that would just be authentically happening. You don't have to be overly explicit about things unless it makes sense for the scenes, the characters, and everything. But I think you're right again about this show isn't going to need it. Joss isn't really that kind of person. You know what I mean? I don't think he will amp it up just because it's HBO. We're going to talk about restrictions. In that sense, we might find that HBO, not necessarily that's a restriction, but like that's an expectation. But there's a lot of shows that aren't really like that. The Sopranos definitely had some sex and sexuality in it, but I don't think it was over the top. I think it was just authentic to the types of people and scenarios that, those mobsters were in, So I don't think it'll be over top. I think it'll make sense within the context of the show. That's my, at least, hope and a bit of an expectation.
Yep.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself, I think.
Thank you.
That no more needs to be said on that subject. You nailed it.
Thank you.
So we will move on to... Okay, they definitely put this here on purpose. The next letter is from Stuff a Muffin, who writes, what do you think the show will have to say on a deeper level, besides all the cool action, fighting, and quips? Women and minorities are still today fighting for equality. I can't imagine what it was like in the Victorian era. Do you think they'll tackle deeper issues on the show? The female characters in the show will have power. Power at a time when women were expected to know their place and stay in there. But these characters, I suspect, won't be subscribing to that belief system, and as a result, upsetting the norm. Thoughts? Love the podcast. Great question there, Stuffermuffin. I think I'm going to pass this one over to you two, because it seems an obvious choice.
I definitely think, without a doubt, that is, again, maybe I'm naive and maybe I'm too hopeful, but I feel like that's why Joss even came up with this idea. I think that's a huge reason why he even came up with a lot of the things he comes up with. So I don't see this being an exception to that, especially because there's so many female characters, especially because they have powers in an era where they shouldn't. Even if he was making this in a modern day, it's amazing to see a show that has so many female protagonists, but it's not modern day. So, I don't... What Joss does with superpowered women is he always makes them complex. And to me personally, that's what a strong woman character means, is that they're complex, because we don't have enough of those still in television and film. That's the refreshing part. I know these characters have superpowers, but that's not going to be the only thing they have. They're going to be rich characters. They're going to be fully fleshed out. And even just by the character descriptions that we have, it already seems that way. So, yeah, I'm a woman. I'm Latina, so it's very important for me for women and minorities to fight for equality. And I just, again, don't see that not being almost the main point of the show, in my opinion.
I think that was beautifully said, and I don't really have much to add to it. There's great insight into, I didn't even think about, the idea of, maybe Joss did choose this era and time because women really were seen as aesthetically pleasing, objects, and I think this will be a wonderful experiment for him to have these women during this time, and then like this surrounding environments, probably a lot of the male characters, and just maybe also different female characters and how they try to relate to them or can't relate to them or just react to them. Like, if we have, maybe some of these characters are not the sex workers at the time, but maybe there'll be times when the Nevers will, or the Touched will, help out these disenfranchised women and disenfranchised women overall and people, and maybe they'll be frowned upon because they're helping these lower humans, you know what I mean? And you're right, the complex characters is not only about physical strength or having a superpower, it's about being a nuanced human being, as we all are.
I don't really have much to add to that, yeah. We've seen from the character bios already, we've seen a paragraph on each character, but already just from that, we can tell these are complex, deep, three-dimensional characters already just based on their introductions. So, I can't really see Joss having a base like that and not using it to say something that echoes throughout the ages. So, yeah, I think he's got everything he needs to make a public statement, and he's got the platform to do it, so it'd be crazy not to. Excellent question there, Stuffermuffin. Thank you for that. Next up, Herbert has emailed us. Hi, I've been a subscriber to your show since you first launched and I'm really digging it. Thank you, Herbert. You're a lot of fun and I always look forward to a new episode. I have a question. It's something I've been thinking about since the cast was announced. With such a large cast, are you, like me, afraid that some characters will get shortchanged? I hope not, because a lot of them sound interesting and could be a major character. What do you think? Thanks. Yeah, I'm sort of on the same wavelength in that it is a very large cast and it's only 10 episodes per season. Even with an hour per episode, there's going to be some characters that aren't as important to the arc of that season as others will be. So you have to imagine that, for instance, I've forgotten her name, sorry. the young lady that speaks only in gibberish, kind of the mascot character. I can't really see her getting a lot of scenes all to herself. And, you know, while I can see the doctor and the surgeon having some time together, I can't really see them crossing over a lot with the story of kind of the Touched and the Nevers and the main crew. So I have a distinct suspicion that we're going to be seeing a lot of the orphanage and a lot of the characters connected to the orphanage. Probably a bit of the characters in the underground. And then about as much of the sort of surgeon and the doctor type people as we see of a bad guy in any Joss Whedon show. And that's how the division of screen time is going to go. So I can see some characters being not forgotten, but sidelined slightly. However, that's season 1. If those characters prove to be fan favourites, I can see them getting larger parts in coming seasons. And just because a character maybe doesn't get much time on screen now doesn't mean that's always going to be the same way.
Agreed. That's a great point, and that's a really great question, because that is a huge cast. As you know, I was reading through and refreshing my memory earlier. There is a lot. But then I started thinking about Orange is the New Black. So a human drama show that, you know, I normally watch a lot of horror, but I really fell in love with that show, and it went for, I believe, now 5 seasons, and that was a pretty big cast. All of those characters in prison. But by the end of it, you know, you'd have like one character have a bigger, you know, presence in an episode, and then maybe not for a couple, and you very slowly learned about more of these characters as the 5 seasons went on. So by the end, you knew so much about all of them and cared about all of them. I mean, that's a long time to like commit to a show and characters, specifically the characters, but I mean, it was still worth it, because even though it was a big cast, you learned about everyone and you cared about everyone a lot. So at the end, like, you were very moved, you know, by their situations and, you know, eventually where their stories ended.
Yeah, and actually I have the same concern, but I'm excited because it must be a writing challenge for them, and I want to see how they tackle that. And I feel like they wouldn't have created so many characters if they didn't think they could tackle it. So it just might be a different kind of writing than maybe we've never seen, or maybe it is definitely going to be like Orange is the New Black. And I feel confident in that writer's room, and there's a reason there's so many characters, you know, because they easily could have just taken some out, you know. It's
an excellent point. Like, comparing it to something like Game of Thrones, this is an original IP, so it's not like we have to stick these 10 characters in because they were in the book, so they have to be here. They've created this show from scratch. They're not going to create a character just to do nothing with them. So, yeah, while I think some characters will get more screen time than others, I do think every character is going to get their moment in the spotlight, their chance to shine. Really had us thinking on that one. I'm still a little kind of zoned in on that. But yeah, thank you very much. And before we close out this episode, we'd like to give a quick shout out to all our followers. Chai Tea Latte, that's with 2 H's. Small Seal 17, Berger Bowie, Penin Vase, Killer Neri, Isaac Bar David, Song Stephen 2, Precious One with no E and 2 S's, The Real FK9, and IMO Fleety. Thank you for your continued support, for sharing our posts on Facebook, and for liking, retweeting, and commenting on our tweets. We really do appreciate it. We really appreciate you. As long as we keep making it, and you keep liking it, we'll keep doing it. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening and being part of the Nevers podcast community. Please remember to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any episodes when they go live, and to rate us on iTunes, as that really helps us grow our audience. You can find us on hbothenevers.com, and you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search at HBO The Nevers. Remember, you can always send us your comments, questions, suggestions, and concerns. Anything you want to say to us at theneverspodcast@gmail.com. Kelly, Gina, thank you for joining me today. Where can our listeners find you when you're in the Neversphere?
For me, I'd say you can find me on Twitter at @KGredner. This is where I'll plug my other projects. I have a horror project called the Spinsters of Horror, and we have a website, spinstersofhorror.com, a once-a-month podcast called I Spit on Your Podcast, and a couple of months ago we did a Buffy episode related to this project too, so please check that out, and that's where I'm at, always.
Awesome. I will definitely do that as well. So you can find me on Twitter as well. My Twitter is at Gina Gemini, but I spell Gemini with an E in the middle. And yeah, feel free to follow my twin sister and I's band. We are called Gemini, again with an E in the middle. If you go to my Twitter, I also link that as well. And we're probably going to come out with a new song in a few days, and we haven't in years. So if you're interested, you can find our album on iTunes, Apple Music, Spotify. We have Buffy-related songs on there. So, again, Gemini.
And I've been Taheg. I'm not on social media, but if you find me in real life, I'll grant a wish. So, until next time, this has been the Nevers Podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Skeksis have CGI tongues, CGI tongues.
This episode of the Nevers Podcast was written, researched, produced, and edited by Matthew Yamanashi. The intro and outro music was produced by Guilherme Moraes. We are more than just a podcast. We're a fan community. You can keep up to date on the Nevers and chat with other fans by visiting HBOthenevers.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search HBO The Nevers, all one word, and click that follow button.
Do you like what you hear on the Nevers Podcast? Care to share your opinion? If you do, then consider leaving a review for the show. Your review helps us to reach new listeners and let us know how we're doing. Go on, it only takes a minute. The Nevers Podcast is not endorsed by Mutant Enemy, Warner Media Entertainment, or any of its subsidiaries, including home box office HBO, and is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. The Nevers and all names, pictures, and audio clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.